The desert colony was quiet at first, as if the world itself held its breath. The ground stretched in endless dunes of red sand, shimmering under the two suns. Winds often carried dust across the colony, but today the sky was strangely clear. Around the colony's edge, machines hummed and alien voices filled the air. They were preparing for what everyone knew was coming, the storm season. Among them was a single human named Daniel. He worked silently, stacking heavy stones, pressing them together with resin made from desert plants. His shelter stood on the edge of the colony, a squat and simple structure of wood and stone. To the aliens, it looked weak and small. They called it a hut, a joke, an embarrassment compared to their glowing energy domes that covered entire plazas. A group of tall, scaled aliens stood nearby, watching him work. One of them hissed loudly so everyone could hear. "Look at him. Building with sticks and rocks like a cave beast." Another joined in, pointing at the half-finished roof. "A gust of wind will tear that apart in seconds. Does he think the storm will be kind to him?" The others laughed, their sharp teeth flashing in the sunlight. Even the smaller alien children laughed as they ran past, mocking the strange human and his primitive design. Daniel did not look at them. His hands moved steadily, pressing another stone into place, sealing it with resin. His face was calm, his expression unreadable. An insectoid alien engineer approached, curious but scornful. Its thin arms folded across its chest as it clicked. "Human, why waste time with this? Our domes are strong. They are powered by crystal cores and energy fields. Join us inside when the storm comes. Your little hut will not last a minute." Daniel finally paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked at the insectoid with steady eyes. "When the storm comes," he said quietly, "we'll see whose shelter stands." The engineer clicked in amusement and turned away. "Arrogance from a creature with no technology," it muttered. The laughter followed Daniel all day. Every stone he placed brought new insults. Every beam of wood he lifted made someone shake their head in disbelief. Yet Daniel did not argue, and he did not stop. He worked until the twin suns dropped lower in the sky and shadows stretched across the sand. By evening, his shelter was complete. It was not tall, nor bright, nor impressive. But it was heavy, its stones pressed tightly together, its beams locked with care. Inside, the air was cool, the walls thick enough to mute the wind outside. The aliens passed by one last time before nightfall. "It is ugly," one said. "It will be buried by the sand." Another snorted. "He will be begging to enter our domes within hours of the storm." Daniel closed the wooden door with a slow push. "We'll see," he murmured again. The next day, the colony grew restless. The horizon had changed. A faint red line stretched across it, so thin that many thought it was only dust. But the elders of the colony knew better. They whispered warnings in the markets. They told their children to stay close. Even the strongest alien voices grew softer as they looked at the sky. By midday, the red line had grown darker. It swelled like a wall rising out of the desert, spreading wider and wider. The air grew heavy, and a strange static charge tingled across the colony's towers. The aliens rushed to their domes. Tall spires lit up with bright energy fields. Shields shimmered into existence, glowing blue and green. The laughter from the day before returned, though this time it was mixed with nervousness. "Look at the human," one alien sneered, pointing toward Daniel's shelter. He was sealing his door with resin, locking the beams into place. "He hides in his cave. When the wind comes, we will hear the stones crash." Another shook its head. "He will not last long. No one can survive without technology." Inside the shelter, Daniel lit a small lantern. The flame flickered, reflecting in his calm eyes. He sat near the wall, listening to the distant rumble. He could already feel the ground vibrating beneath him. His hand rested on the stone floor, and he felt the power of the storm building. Outside, the sky turned darker still. The suns vanished behind a curtain of rising dust. The colony fell into a strange twilight. The first heavy gusts of wind hit, carrying sand like burning needles. The aliens cheered as their domes held strong, glowing brightly in the storm's first wave. They pointed toward the human shelter, expecting it to crumble immediately. But the little stone and wood structure stood unmoved, its roof pressed down tightly, its walls heavy and silent. Daniel closed his eyes. The storm had not even begun, yet already the aliens underestimated it. He whispered to himself, words only he could hear. "This isn't my first storm." The laughter outside faded as the wind grew louder. The sand roared across the colony like an ocean of fire. Entire dunes shifted and collapsed. The storm was alive now, and it was hungry. And far on the horizon, beyond the red wall of dust, lightning cracked across the sky. It lit up the storm's true size, an endless tower of sand reaching into the heavens, stretching wider than the eye could see. The largest storm in decades. The aliens went quiet inside their glowing domes. Fear spread across their faces as they realized how small they truly were. Daniel sat in the dark, the lantern flickering, listening to the storm approach. The horizon was no longer just dark. It was a monster rising, a storm greater than any they had faced in living memory. And it was coming straight for them. The desert sky grew heavy as the horizon burned with dust. Every creature in the colony stopped what they were doing. The red suns were fading, swallowed by a wall of sand that stretched like a mountain across the desert. The aliens stared with uneasy eyes, their laughter fading. Daniel stood by his shelter, a strange house built from wood, stone, and mud taken from the desert floor. It looked crude compared to the shining energy domes that hummed with alien technology. Some of the younger aliens still giggled nervously. "That pile of dirt won't last a heartbeat," one whispered. But older aliens, the ones who had seen storms before, frowned. "This storm is not like others," a lizard-like elder said quietly. "It is alive." The energy domes buzzed brighter, their blue shields stretching against the wind that began to roar across the sands. Daniel tightened the leather straps around his small door and placed heavy stones at its base. He moved with calm precision, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. "Daniel," a tall insectoid worker called out, "come inside our dome. Yours will collapse. Don't be foolish." Daniel simply shook his head. His voice was low but steady. "No dome lasts forever. You'll see." The storm struck. It began with a scream in the air, a shrill whistle that cut through every living ear. Then the wind slammed against the colony with the force of a hammer. Sand poured like an ocean wave, swallowing the first rows of buildings. Visibility fell to nothing. Aliens rushed into their domes, the blue energy fields shimmering like fragile glass. Inside the domes, the aliens pressed close together. They watched through the shimmering barriers as the storm grew stronger. Bolts of sand charged with static electricity cracked in the sky. Lightning danced across the dunes. Outside, Daniel's shelter was nearly invisible, swallowed by sand. Some aliens laughed again, their fear mixing with mockery. "He's finished," one said. "No walls of mud can stand against this." But as the hours passed, something strange happened. The energy domes began to flicker. The storm's electricity was stronger than anything the colony had prepared for. Each surge made the barriers ripple and crackle. Inside, panic spread. "It cannot hold," cried a scaled alien mother, clutching her young. Meanwhile, Daniel sat inside his shelter in silence. The roof groaned under the weight of sand, but it did not fall. The thick stone base held strong, and the layered wood bent but did not break. The storm's energy rolled over it, but there was no technology to short-circuit, no shimmering field to overload. It was simple. And it endured. The storm raged for hours. Dust filled the sky until it seemed the planet itself had disappeared. The colony shook under thunder. The energy domes cracked, one by one. Screams filled the air as the first dome collapsed, its shimmering shield vanishing into sparks. The aliens inside were forced to huddle against the storm, sand cutting into their skin like knives. From within his shelter, Daniel heard the screams. His jaw tightened. He lit a small fire from desert wood, its smoke curling upward into the dim air. He stayed calm, waiting. At last, the storm broke. The winds began to die, the sand fell back to the desert floor, and the sky slowly cleared. What had been a bustling colony was now a graveyard of broken domes and shattered metal. Half the colony's technology lay buried under mountains of sand. When the surviving aliens crawled out from the ruins of their domes, They blinked in disbelief. Daniel's shelter stood. It was covered in sand, its roof half buried, but the walls still held. The fire inside glowed through the cracks, a warm signal of life. Daniel opened the door, pushing sand aside, and stepped out calmly. His clothes were dusty, but his eyes were sharp. The aliens stared. Some were silent. Some whispered. He survived. His house, it stands. That's impossible. The insectoid worker from before approached him slowly, her antennae trembling. Your shelter, it worked, she said softly. Daniel looked at the ruins of their domes, then back at the aliens. His voice was firm. You built walls of light, but light cannot stop the storm. You forgot the oldest rule, survive with the world, not against it. The lizard elder lowered his head in shame. We mocked you, human. We thought your ways were foolish. Daniel knelt, picking up a handful of sand. He let it slip through his fingers. Sand respects stone. Wood bends but does not break. The storm understands this. I just listened. The aliens around him exchanged looks. For the first time, there was no laughter. There was only respect, mixed with fear. Because if a single human could outlast a storm that broke their greatest technology, what else were humans capable of? That thought hung heavy in the desert air. And then, far in the distance, a low rumble echoed across the dunes. Daniel turned his head sharply. His face darkened. The storm was not over. It was only the beginning. The colony was silent after the storm. The air smelled of burned ozone and wet sand. Broken domes lay scattered like glass across the desert floor. Aliens worked in silence, pulling survivors from the ruins, burying their dead beneath the dunes. But Daniel did not rest. He stood on the highest mound of sand and listened. His face was hard, his eyes locked on the horizon. The ground beneath them trembled. At first, the aliens thought it was the aftershock of the storm, just the desert shifting its weight. But Daniel's voice cut through the silence. No. That was not the end. That was a warning. The aliens froze. The insectoid worker, her wings torn from the storm, stepped forward. What do you mean, human? Daniel turned slowly, his voice calm but heavy. Another storm is coming. Bigger. Stronger. The first one was only the hand. The second will be the fist. Fear spread through the colony. The young chattered nervously, their antennae twitching. The scaled elders hissed, their tails scraping the sand. How can you know this? One alien demanded. You have no scanners. No weather machines. No sky readers. Daniel bent down, scooping sand into his palm. He lifted it, letting the grains fall. They did not fall straight but twisted and curled in the air, drawn by an invisible pull. The desert speaks, Daniel said quietly. The wind bends the sand wrong. The storm is coming from deeper within the planet. It carries something with it. The aliens looked at each other uneasily. The insectoid worker swallowed. What carries it? Daniel's eyes narrowed. Not just wind. Not just sand. Something alive. The words struck like a whip. The colony erupted into chatter. Some dismissed him immediately. Impossible, a horned alien barked. The storms are nature, nothing more. But the elder lizard shook his head. His scales were cracked from the last storm, his eyes heavy with memory. I have seen this once before. Long ago. When I was young. The desert hides creatures within its storms. Beasts of sand and lightning. They wake only when the planet is angry. Silence fell again. Even the skeptics did not laugh this time. Daniel looked around at the broken colony. Your domes are gone. Your machines are dead. If you stay here, you will all be buried. The insectoid worker's voice trembled. Then what do we do? Daniel pointed to his shelter. We build. Stone, wood, mud. Things the storm cannot eat. And we dig deep. Beneath the sand. That is the only way. But the aliens hesitated. Their pride was still strong, even after the storm. One of the engineers sneered. You want us to lower ourselves to your primitive ways. To build with dirt like animals. Daniel's eyes went cold. He stepped closer, standing chest to chest with the engineer, though the alien towered over him. His voice was a low growl. "Your pride just killed half your colony. Do you want the rest buried with them?" The engineer faltered, but said nothing. The elder finally spoke. "Enough. The human is right. We must prepare. We will follow him." The decision was made. For the next hours, the colony worked under Daniel's command. He showed them how to cut stone blocks from the nearby cliffs, how to bind them with mud into walls that curved with the wind instead of resisting it. He taught them how to dig trenches that could channel the sand away instead of letting it bury everything. At first, the aliens struggled. Their hands were unused to this kind of labor. But slowly, their movements grew steady. For the first time, they sweated under the desert suns like Daniel. For the first time, they bent their bodies to the will of the earth, not machines. As they worked, Daniel spoke in short bursts, teaching them lessons of survival. Stone listens. Treat it with care. Wood bends. It does not fight. Sand never stops moving. You must move with it. The aliens listened. And some began to understand. But even as they worked, the horizon darkened again. This time, it was different. The storm did not roar like wind. It pulsed. The clouds of sand shifted as if something massive crawled within them. Sparks of red lightning lit the sky. The aliens froze at the sight. Fear returned to their eyes. Daniel stood tall on the half-built wall. His voice cut through the panic. "Do not stop. This storm is alive. And it is already here." The ground shook harder now. A deep rumble echoed through the desert floor, like the heartbeat of some giant buried beneath the dunes. And then, something moved in the storm. A shape. Enormous. Towering above the clouds. A body made not of flesh, but of sand and lightning. Its eyes burned with fire. The aliens screamed. Daniel did not move. He stared at the creature, his fists clenched. His voice was barely more than a whisper, but those nearest him heard it. "So it's true." The insectoid workers' antennae trembled. What is that?" Daniel's eyes did not leave the beast. The reason humans were never meant to live here. The creature roared, and the desert itself shook. The second storm began. The sky cracked open with red lightning. Sand twisted into whirlwinds that clawed at the half-built walls. And in the middle of it all, the storm beast rose higher, its body forming and reforming, a mountain of living dust and fire. The aliens screamed in terror. Some ran for the half-buried shelters. Others dropped their tools and fell to the ground, their courage broken. But Daniel did not move. He stood on the wall they had just built, his clothes whipping in the storm, his face lit by flashes of lightning. His voice cut through the chaos. "Hold the walls. Dig the trenches deeper. Do not run." The aliens looked up at him, shocked. The insectoid worker, clutching a cracked piece of stone, shouted back, "That thing will kill us all. How can we fight sand itself?" Daniel's gaze never left the storm beast. "You don't fight sand. You shape it." The beast bellowed, its roar shaking the desert. It swept one massive arm of dust toward the colony. The wall trembled as the wave of sand crashed against it. Cracks spiderwebbed across the stone. Aliens cried out, bracing against the impact. Daniel leapt down, landing hard in the trench. He shoved an alien engineer to his feet. "Pack the walls tighter. Wedge the stones with wood." The engineer hesitated, then obeyed. Others followed, moving with desperate speed. The storm beast roared again, lowering its blazing eyes toward the colony. Its face twisted into something almost human, almost mocking. The elder lizard hissed in horror. "It knows we are here." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Good. Let it look." Another wave of sand rose, higher this time, curling above like a giant claw ready to crush everything. The aliens panicked. Daniel grabbed a fallen metal rod, its edge sharp from the storm. He lifted it high and shouted, his voice like thunder. "Now, into the trenches." The aliens dove into the dugouts they had carved. The wave of sand crashed over the walls, slamming down with the force of an avalanche. But instead of burying them, the trenches channeled the sand away, splitting it into streams that roared past the colony. The walls held. Barely. When the dust cleared, The aliens stared in shock. They were still alive. The shelters Daniel had forced them to build had worked. The insectoid worker's voice trembled. The human, he was right. But the storm beast was not finished. It rose higher, gathering itself, its body glowing with veins of lightning. This time, it opened a mouth of sand and let out a scream that was not wind, but something deeper, something alive. The sound shook the bones of every creature in the colony. Some aliens dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Daniel staggered, but he did not fall. He forced himself to shout above the roar. Listen to me. This thing is not a storm, it is a predator. It feeds on fear. If you give it fear, you are already dead. The words cut through the panic like a blade. Slowly, the aliens looked up at him. Their eyes were wide, but some of the trembling stopped. The elder hissed. Then what do we give it, human? Daniel gripped the metal rod tighter, his knuckles white. We give it fire. He ran to the ruins of a broken dome, tearing loose the remains of a fuel cell. Sparks danced as he smashed it against stone. He poured the leaking fuel onto a pile of wood and cloth, striking his metal rod against a rock until sparks caught. The flames roared to life, orange against the red storm. The storm beast recoiled, its eyes narrowing. For the first time, it stepped back. The aliens gasped. Daniel turned to them, firelight flickering across his face. Do you see? It fears what it cannot consume. It cannot eat flame. The insectoid worker's wings fluttered weakly. Then we burn it. Daniel nodded. Yes. But not with machines. Not with weapons. With what the desert gives us. Fire, stone, and courage. The elder raised his cracked tail. Then we burn with him. For the first time, the colony moved as one. Aliens tore apart broken shelters for wood. Others dragged out shattered fuel cells, spilling their contents into makeshift pits. Sparks lit across the sand as Daniel showed them how to strike stone to flame. Soon, fires blazed around the colony, circles of light in the raging storm. The storm beast howled, striking at the flames. But every time its claws of dust swept down, the fire only grew, feeding on the wind. Daniel stood at the center, his metal rod burning at the tip like a spear of flame. He lifted it high, shouting into the storm. You will not bury us. Not today. With a roar, he charged, leaping onto the wall, and hurled the flaming spear into the heart of the beast. The fire sank into its chest. For a moment, the storm beast convulsed, its body twisting. Lightning crackled across its form. The air burned with heat. And then it screamed. A sound so terrible, the desert itself shook. The beast stumbled backward, its body unraveling into 1,000 streams of sand. The storm around it faltered, weakening. The aliens cried out, not in fear this time, but in triumph. Daniel dropped to one knee, exhausted, but his eyes stayed locked on the fading figure. The elder's voice was low, filled with awe. The human drove it back. But Daniel shook his head. His voice was grim. No. I only hurt it. And now it knows we can resist. The storm beast dissolved into the desert, vanishing into the dunes. The winds died. The fires crackled, the only sound left. The aliens looked at the human, waiting, afraid to speak. Daniel rose slowly, his face hard as stone. It will return, he said. And it will not come alone. The storm did not stop. Hours had passed since the first wave of sand slammed into the colony, and yet the desert winds only grew stronger. The ground trembled beneath the endless roar, as if the planet itself was angry. Inside their domes, the alien colonists cowered in fear. The shimmering barriers of energy buzzed and flickered, their light dimming with every blast of sand. Panic spread among them. A dome near the edge of the colony collapsed first. The shield failed, and in an instant, the storm swallowed it whole. Sand poured in like a living flood, and the creatures inside screamed as their advanced machines failed to protect them. The survivors inside other domes watched in terror, realizing that their technology was not invincible. Meanwhile, Daniel sat quietly inside his shelter. His walls of stone and wood did not glow with power, nor did they hum with energy. They simply stood, strong and unmoving, holding against the storm's rage. The sound outside was deafening, but inside, it was steady. The shelter shook now and then, but each time it held, as if it had been waiting for this very test. A group of aliens, their dome flickering dangerously, rushed toward Daniel's hut. Their eyes were wide with fear. They pounded on his wooden door. "Human, let us in," one shouted. Daniel opened the door only enough to speak through. "You laughed at this shelter," he reminded them, his voice calm despite the storm. The alien's voice cracked. "We were wrong. Please, if we stay outside, we will die." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, with a firm nod, he pulled the door wide and let them inside. The aliens stumbled in, coughing and trembling, their once proud expressions now broken by fear. They looked around at the simple walls, the stone floor, and the roof reinforced with heavy beams. It was so basic compared to their advanced designs, yet it felt safe. The storm slammed against the hut again, but the walls held steady. The aliens huddled close, staring at Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. "How?" one whispered. "Why is this shelter stronger than our technology?" Daniel shrugged. "Because it was built for this land, not against it. You tried to fight the storm with light and force. I built with what the desert gave me: stone, wood, weight, and balance. The storm cannot destroy what belongs to the desert." As the hours stretched on, more aliens arrived at his door. One by one, their domes had collapsed, their pride shattered. They came from every species: tall, scaled beings, feathered ones, even creatures with shells. All of them had once mocked him. Now, they begged for a place inside his worthless shelter. And Daniel, though he remembered their laughter, opened the door each time. His shelter filled with frightened colonists until every corner was crowded. The storm reached its peak. Outside, the desert became a living sea of sand, waves higher than mountains crashing down. Energy domes sparked and collapsed, their remains buried under dunes. The colony was being erased. But Daniel's hut remained, small and humble, yet unbroken. The winds screamed, but the shelter refused to fall. Inside, the aliens could not believe what they were witnessing. "We mocked you," one whispered. "We called you foolish." Daniel only gave a tired smile. Sometimes the strongest shelter is the one that looks weakest. The desert doesn't care about your pride or machines. It only respects what can endure. At last, after what felt like forever, the storm began to weaken. The roar faded to a heavy wind, then to silence. The aliens waited, afraid to step outside. When Daniel finally opened the door, the sight left everyone speechless. The colony was gone. Where once stood shining domes, there was only endless sand. Towers had collapsed, machines buried, homes erased. The desert had swallowed their pride in a single night. But Daniel's shelter still stood. It was the last building remaining. The aliens stepped outside slowly, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some fell to their knees in the sand, weeping. Others stared at Daniel with awe, no longer seeing him as a weak creature from a green world. They now saw him as something far more dangerous, someone who understood survival in ways they did not. One alien leader turned to Daniel. His voice shook as he spoke. "You saved us, all of us. Without your shelter, we would be dead. We mocked you. We thought humans were nothing but soft, foolish beings. But now," he lowered his head. "Now we see we were wrong." Daniel stood tall, his simple clothes covered in dust, his face calm. This storm chose who would stand and who would fall. It was never about technology. It was about respect for the land, for its strength, for its rules. He looked across the ruined colony. "Maybe now you'll learn." The aliens bowed their heads, silent and humbled. The desert wind whispered across the dunes, carrying away the last traces of their arrogance. And Daniel, the human they once mocked, became the only one who had stood against the storm and endured. Cliffhanger. In the distance, on the far side of the desert, another dark wall of clouds began to rise. The largest storm was yet to come. The desert lay silent after the storm, but the calm was false. Dust still swirled in low clouds, hiding the horizon. Daniel stood on a small dune, his eyes scanning the edge of the colony. He could see the ruins of energy domes, twisted metal, and shattered pride. Behind him, The aliens, once mocking, now trembling, gathered in the shelter he had built. But Daniel did not relax. His instincts told him the storm had only tested them. The real challenge had yet to come. Far away, the sky darkened. A low rumble rolled across the desert, like a giant awakening. The horizon grew red, black, and orange, twisting as if the desert itself was alive. It was taller, wider, and angrier than the last storm. "Another one," hissed the insectoid worker, her antennae trembling. "How can it be stronger?" Daniel's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Because the first was a scout. This is the master. And it's bringing the desert with it." The aliens gasped. The elder lizard hissed. "Then we fight." Daniel shook his head. "No. We survive. We endure. And we teach." He stepped outside the shelter, the winds hitting him like a wall. Dust stung his face, but he did not flinch. Behind him, the aliens hesitated. Then, one by one, they followed, trusting the human who had survived when all else failed. Daniel directed them with precision. "Stack stones. Build low walls. Dig trenches. Do not try to stop the storm. Let it flow where you guide it. Bend with it, don't fight it." The aliens moved quickly, following his commands. Even the smallest, weakest ones carried stones or sandbags. They had learned respect for the desert and for the human who understood it. The storm arrived in a roar. Waves of sand, stronger than any before, crashed against the colony. Lightning ripped across the sky. The ground shook. The energy domes, rebuilt after the first storm, collapsed again, useless against the raw power of the desert. But Daniel's structures held. Walls of stone bent slightly but did not break. Trenches channeled the sand away. The fires he had taught the aliens to light burned like beacons, guiding the flow of the storm and scaring off the sand predators within it. The aliens watched, wide-eyed. The human they had mocked was now their guide, their protector, their teacher. A massive wave of sand rose, taller than any dune. It swept toward the shelter like a living thing. Daniel stood in front, his fists clenched, his eyes locked on the approaching wall. "Hold," he shouted. "Do not panic. Let it flow into the trenches." The aliens did as he said, shouting and pushing stones, shoving wood, digging channels in the sand. Together, they worked as one, following the human's knowledge and instincts. The wave hit the trenches, crashing, twisting, roaring. For a moment, it seemed it would overwhelm them. But the trenches held. The walls of stone and wood stood firm. Daniel led them, moving through the chaos, directing, correcting, inspiring. Finally, after hours that felt like days, the storm began to weaken. The massive sand waves subsided, lightning faded, and the winds died. The desert was silent again. The aliens stepped outside the shelter, looking at the ruins. Where once stood their domes, there was nothing. The desert had claimed it all. But Daniel's shelter, small, simple, human-made, still stood. Stones and wood, mud and care, had survived the impossible. For a long moment, the aliens were speechless. Then the insectoid worker spoke, her voice trembling with awe. He survived again." "How?" Daniel wiped sand from his face, his expression calm but tired. "Because I learned to live with the desert, not against it. Technology is only as strong as the hand that uses it. Pride is useless here. Respect is everything." The elder lizard stepped forward, bowing low. "Human, we were wrong. We thought you were weak. That your species could not survive. But today, you have taught us what strength truly is." Daniel nodded, not with pride, but with quiet certainty. Strength is not about power. It is about understanding. Endurance. Courage when the world itself tries to bury you. That is why humans survive on death worlds. That is why we endure. The aliens looked at him differently now. Fear had turned into respect. Mockery had turned into awe. And for the first time, they realized that humans were not just another species, they were something the desert had taught, something forged in challenge, danger, and endless struggle. The desert remained harsh, its winds still shifting dunes across the horizon. But Daniel had proven one thing: when humans face danger, they do not flee. They adapt, survive, and endure. The alien colonists slowly began to rebuild, this time following Daniel's guidance. Stones were stacked carefully. Trenches were dug with precision. Fires burned in patterns that guided the wind, not tried to block it. And as night fell, the stars of the twin suns shone faintly over the ruined colony. Daniel stood on the highest wall, looking out over the desert. He knew the storms would return, stronger still. But he also knew this: no force, no beast, no desert could break humans. Not when they had learned the lessons of endurance, respect, and courage. The aliens gathered around him. No one mocked him anymore. No one laughed. They had learned what it truly meant to survive and what it meant to respect a human. And in the quiet desert night, Daniel whispered to the winds, almost as a promise. The desert will roar again. But we will stand. Always. The humans had won not by strength or technology, but by understanding the world, respecting its rules, and refusing to fear it. The aliens would never forget this day.